Welcome to everybody to this session of the AgrAbility webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about urban agriculture, and it's actually going to be a two-part webinar. First, we're going to have an overview of urban agriculture from Emily Toner of Purdue Extension, and then we're going to talk more specifically about the application of urban agriculture to veterans and people with disabilities that are involved in agriculture. Before we start the actual presentation, I just have a few quick instructions for you. As hopefully you know, the audio is available through both the computer, over the internet, and through the phone line. So hopefully you're connected and are hearing me. If you have any issues with computer sound, you may look under the Communicate menu at the top and look at Computer Audio Settings. We do have closed captioning today, and that's being offered through the Media Viewer on the right column, and you can make adjustments to that in terms of the size of the text. You can also simply X out that window if you don't want to have those viewing, or you can collapse it, whichever you choose to do. You can actually collapse or expand any of the windows on the side, on the right-hand column, or you can contract or expand the size of that entire column by dragging on the border. For questions about the presentation itself, please use the chat window, which is also on the right-hand column of your screen. You just enter a message into the box, and then make sure that you click the send icon in order to send that to us. If you have questions about the presentation, please feel free to enter those at any time. Also, during the question and answer period after the presentations, we will allow you to ask questions verbally if you have a web microphone or want to use the phone line. You should be able to see a raise hand icon near your name on the participant list, and so please click on that if you would like to ask a question verbally, and we will do our best to enable your microphone. We have 4 survey questions. We were having a little technical issues getting those going before the session, so we'll see if those work. If they don't work during the session, then we'll plan to send you a little poll after the webinar to get your feedback on your opinions of the information, the technology, and other things. We are recording this session, and it will be archived on our website under the online training link. If you have any questions or issues during the webinar with any technical problems, we ask that you use the chat window, and if for some reason you're not able to do that, we ask that you use the email address agrability@agrability.org. For those of you that might not be familiar with AgrAbility, we are a USDA-sponsored program, and we focus on issues of disability in agriculture. Every AgrAbility project is a partnership between a land-grant university and at least one nonprofit disability services organization. There's also one national AgrAbility project, and that is led through the Breaking New Ground Resource Center here at Purdue University. Our partners on the National AgrAbility Grant include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, the Arthritis Foundation Heartland Region, University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and Colorado State University. If you'd like to learn more about AgrAbility or tap into any of our other resources, feel free to look us up on the agrability.org website. There are archived webinars for all of our past webinars there, in addition to a lot of other resources that you might find useful. Okay. The first part of our session, as I mentioned, is an overview of urban agriculture from Emily Toner. Emily is the urban agriculture educator for Purdue Extension in Marion County in Indianapolis, where she has lived for 2 years. And her duties there include supporting the urban agriculture community, providing direct educational opportunities, which I have participated in, which are done very well. She is originally from Iowa, and she received a bachelor's in agronomy from Iowa State, and then traveled on to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and earned 2 master's degrees, one in geography and one in journalism. At this point, I'm going to pass the ball to Emily for her part of the presentation, and then we will shift over to Cindy's presentation as soon as Emily is done.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can see me now. So I'm happy to be with all of you today, and thank you for welcoming me, Paul, into the AgrAbility webinar this afternoon. I'm really excited to talk to you about urban agriculture, which is what I spend my time on here in Indianapolis. So I don't know, Paul, should I just say slide when I want the next slide? Or can I actually switch the slides myself? Yes, I can. Okay, I'll switch the slides. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, Paul introduced me, but I am the urban agriculture educator with Purdue Extension, Marion County. And so what you see there underneath my name and our logo is a nice cityscape of Indianapolis' skyline. And so we're a city of about 1 million people. And so it's densely urban, and it is a space where we have a lot of agriculture that's up and coming. And so a couple of the other photos there just highlight where I've been in the past. So I have agronomy from Iowa State University, and then from UW-Madison, geography and journalism degree. So a lot of my interest comes from out of agriculture and soil health and urban agriculture, and then also out of interest in how people interact with their landscape through geography, and then how we're building a community food system, and journalism helped me explore that as well. So jumping in here, what I was going to do is give a little bit of an overview of what I'll be talking about today. And so that is just basically defining urban agriculture and going through a few types of urban agriculture so we can really get out there. What are we talking about? If you're listening to urban agriculture as a topic for the first time, sometimes that can seem sort of like an oxymoron. You know, agriculture in an urban space typically associated with rural, so just getting some images and some description out there of what is urban agriculture, and then digging it a little bit more into if you're thinking about starting or developing your urban agriculture project, what are some of the common challenges that urban farmers face, and then some of the areas of opportunity that are particularly present in an urban setting, and then ending with just a little bit on the financial trade-offs for urban farmers to be in the urban space. So what is urban agriculture? I'm giving you actually the University of Missouri Extension's definition. I particularly like that one. And so I'll read it here, but then I want to break it down a little bit before we move on into the presentation. So what is urban agriculture? It's the growing, processing, and distribution of food crops and animal products by and for the local community and within an urban environment. So you can see that first chunk, growing, processing, and distribution, encompasses a little more than just growing, just the seeds and harvest. Is talking about actually getting the food out into the community. So, that includes farmers markets and CSA programs and that sort of thing, beyond just the actual act of producing the food. And then crucial here is that it's including crops and animal products. So in the urban setting, we do have poultry and goats, rabbits, and a couple of other, animals that you would find as urban livestock. And so just to think, and bees, I guess, are in there as well, that we're not just talking about plants in a garden, but we're also talking about some animal agriculture here as well. And then the little phrase in between hyphens there, by and for the local community, is really important in urban agriculture because it tends to be something that's meant to strengthen the community and the community-based food system that you have within an urban setting. And so, no one's really doing the urban ag for exports. They're really doing it because they want to enhance the food supply and the community built around that food supply in their location, in their, as it says, local community. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what does that look like then, people producing this food in the city. 4 types of common urban agriculture. There's even more beyond community gardens, market farms, institution-driven gardens, and urban homesteads. But those are some common types. And then what I'm going to talk most about today is the market farm category. So talking about people that are going to sell or to distribute on a scale that's larger than just for their own consumption. So the first type, community garden, I'm showing you some images from Indianapolis here. This is one of our thriving community gardens, Fall Creek Garden. And so what I mean by a community garden is a space where there's shared use of land and gardening together. Sometimes, like in this image, it's on individual plots. So you can rent a plot at Fall Creek Gardens and have your own space, but you're doing it right next to, a dozen other gardeners. And then there's also a space in Fall Creek Gardens that can reflect another type of urban agriculture, which is gardening actually together on the same piece of land. So there's a teaching and youth garden there that's collectively managed. So community garden is one. And then we have the market farm. And so here you see two examples of market farms in Indianapolis. And so really talking about a farm whose intention is growing to produce at a larger scale than a plot for a family, really for many people. So on the left-hand side, you see Growing Places Indy, and that is a nonprofit market farm. And so that space you see there is actually a community U-Pick space. They also do quite a large production of microgreens that are sold into restaurants and at farmers markets. And then on the right, you see Big City Farms, which is a little less than an acre space that is on the edge of a parking lot and is a for-profit farm. So Big City Farm sells at markets to restaurants, has a farm stand, that sort of thing, but is the livelihood of the person who manages that farm. So the third type that I had listed was institution-driven garden, and listing two examples here, but this is also a really common category for urban agriculture. You have hospitals, churches, schools, other types of institutions, universities that are wanting to have a space where they have agriculture either as a teaching tool or as a production mechanism so that they can source some of their food that way. And so the example on the left here is Eskenazi Hospital Sky Farm. That is a large hospital in Indianapolis who has converted part of their rooftop to produce some of the fresh food that they would like to use in their cafeteria. But then also, it's a pretty small percentage of what they use in their cafeteria, but it is something. And they also use it as a teaching space and a wellness learning space. So there are actually a couple of community garden plots up there as well. But so that's what I'm talking about when I say an institution-driven garden, something like that hospital rooftop space. I also have an image here of Paramount School of Excellence in Indianapolis. It's a charter school, it's K-8, and they have a really cool program there where they have dairy goats, and the students milk the goats, and then they have a creamery and they're inside the school, and they turn it into goat cheese and actually sell that. So that's another example of an institution-driven agricultural space, a school that wants to have their students come into contact with animal agriculture. They also have a garden space there and using it as a learning tool, but then also have some products coming out of it. So the fourth type that I'll just mention here briefly is an urban homestead, and I didn't find a picture of one from Indianapolis. This is a picture from Pasadena, California. But basically the idea that someone wants to very intensively cultivate their residential lot space so that they can be producing on a scale where they're almost trying to approach self-sustainability with some of their crops. So urban agriculture, because it's a lot larger than, a single raised bed or something like that. But I'm not going to be talking a lot about that today because I'm going to focus on people that are doing it for an audience outside of their own consumption. So moving on to the third part here, I'm going to highlight, as you get into developing an urban agriculture project, what are some of the common challenges that urban farmers face in that process? It's a really unconventional use of urban space, and so you're going to run into some things that you might not if you were converting an acre in the country. And so I guess I should mention the scale for us in the Indianapolis and urban agriculture really ranges from maybe a quarter acre up to 8 acres. I can think of one example, 10 acres, but you're really around the 1 acre size. So some of the things that people come up against when they're looking at a half or a full acre in an urban setting is soil quality. So chances are that piece of land has been used heavily before you get to it to convert it to the agricultural use that you'd like. And so there may be contaminants there based on what the prior land use was. And so that could be toxicity that is problematic, or it could even just be more physical contamination, trash that's there, crushed brick, former construction materials, things that, aren't necessarily going to register on or be on a list of toxic elements when you're thinking about the compounds that are, VOCs and heavy metals and things that you try to avoid, but that they actually are contaminating the soil from an agricultural perspective and would be very hard to grow there. Also compaction, if there has been any building or use of that space, even, parking lots, things like that, that the soil is going to be really lacking in the porosity and that you would want for growing, and so it's going to be smashed down. You have to deal with that. And even just subsoil. So thinking that what you really want is that rich, dark, black topsoil with the nutrients and the texture that you're looking for, but what you might actually be working with is the subsoil, the soil that comes underneath that in a natural profile and isn't ideal for plant growth. So just some thoughts about soil quality there in an urban setting. Another common challenge is water and just the access to water. So in Indianapolis, we have quite a few vacant lots, and it's common for someone to drive down their block and think, gosh, I'd love to convert that lot that's five properties down from me, nothing's happening there. Wouldn't it be beautiful if it had vegetables and flowers and, production happening on it? But one thing that you really, really need to consider before you invest in that sort of conversion is, what is my access to water? So if there's no structure on the site, it's common that there's no water hookup on the site. You may have a kind neighbor who says, sure, hook up to my side faucet, and you may have a hydrant that's near enough by that you can tap into it if your municipality allows that. In Indianapolis, we do, and you can get a meter from our public water provider. But, if that hydrant's across the street, then you have to think about how are you going to access that with a hose that has to go across the street with cars driving over and all that sort of thing. So water access is really important. And then policy can be a barrier and a challenge in an urban setting. And I'm coming up to the opportunity, so I know I'm spending a little bit of time talking about just some things to think about as you get into it, but I really want, if you are developing an urban project for production, to be aware of these things going in. And so just because it's a challenge doesn't mean you can't overcome it, but you definitely want to have your eyes open when you're selecting a site. So zoning here in Indianapolis, we have urban agriculture zoning that speaks specifically to the use of a site for urban livestock or gardening as a primary use on a site. And so you just want to be aware, what does my city say is okay to do on this urban lot? Can I compost? Can I have a chicken? Can I sell from the lot? We now, in our zoning, it explicitly says if you're growing on a residential lot, you are allowed to sell from that residential lot. But you just really want to be aware. So check in with your local city planning office and see what the zoning says regarding urban agriculture. Sometimes it says nothing at all, in which case, you may have very little regulation around what you're doing, but oftentimes there will be something on the books that is from a time when people were really hoping to push agriculture out of the city limits, and so you might have to deal with some antiquated regulations. And so then the final challenge there is the learning curve, and so basically saying that a lot of urban farmers are beginning and new farmers, and so it's just the learning curve that comes along with starting any type of enterprise for the first time, which is that you have a lot that you need to work through, and then also you maybe have a very small peer network and people to turn to say, how do you do this, or I'm facing this challenge, what can I do to work on it? So I wanted to talk briefly about a couple of things that Purdue Extension does to help farmers through that learning curve. And so, I know we have people tuning in from all around the country, and so you may have programs in your area like these, but I also just wanted to make people aware, if you're tuning in from Indiana, about some things that are happening in your state that can help you through that learning curve. So I have started a project here called the Purdue Urban Farm Incubator. And so the idea is that it's a land-based program that is supporting new urban farmers to get started. So it's called an incubator space as in a small business incubator. And so we're getting people's enterprises up and running, giving them a space that's a little lower risk than normal. So they have some infrastructure. The first year there's no land rent. They'll have some education that is provided along with their spot on the site, and then also they have access to a farmer mentor who has a few hours a week committed to an experienced urban farmer who is committed to just mentoring and helping people work through challenges as they come up against them. So this is a cool type of program. There are many incubator projects all around the country, actually, and several urban incubators. So you might see if you have one in your area as well. This is our first growing season, and so we are actually still converting the site, although we do have our farmers selected, and we had our farmer welcome last week. So we have 9 urban farmers who will be on the space, and a wide range of goals for those farmers. We actually have our Ivy Tech Community College, the culinary school has a plot there, and they are going to be bringing students out to talk about seasonality. We have a couple of people who are really growing to maximize production and sell. And then we also have a community nonprofit who is having a teen program manage a plot, and their produce will be mostly given away or sold at low cost to people in the neighborhood. So it's a really cool space, and it'll be a space that within Indiana, people will be welcome to join us for the educational opportunities there as they arise, and it won't be just limited to the farmers on the plots. We'll open it up, and hopefully it can benefit others as well. So another network to plug into in Indianapolis is a peer network of urban farmers, and so it's called IndieGrown. You can go to indiegrown.com, and there's an application process to apply to become a farmer member. But this is a really important idea for people that are starting urban agriculture projects for the first time, or even just starting small farm projects, not in an urban farm setting, is to look around and find who is my peer network and have they organized themselves in a way that I can plug into. This group has 4 farms as part of it right now, and we're really looking to grow it this year. And it's some place where like-minded urban farmers can come together and talk about planning the season, harvest, how are things going. We'd like to plan a couple of tours this year, but it's just a really nice thing if you can find your peer network and plug in. So, and one more program I'm going to mention here from Purdue Extension is the Beginning Farmer Program, and it's through the USDA's Beginning Farmer Rancher Program Development Program. And for Purdue Extension, we're in our 2nd year now of offering programming through this resource, and we have tours. So I think there are going to be 10 tours this year for beginning farmers, people that want to learn how should I design my space, what kind of crops are people growing. We're going to host one in Indianapolis in May that's focusing on hand tools So, things that are really to scale for urban and small farmers are a focus here. And the tours are an awesome way to plug in to what's happening around the state and meet the other people on the tour as well. So finding that peer network that I was mentioning. We're also going to have regional workshops, field trips to other states. In June, we'll be headed to Wisconsin for a week, and I believe in September, this program is headed to Maine, and the whole focus there is to connect not only to the other farmers, small-scale and urban farmers going on the trip with you, but to people in other states doing the same type of work. Really, really great learning opportunity, and those will be happening next year as well. And then the final thing that I'm listing here that we have coming up is a really great resource to help support new urban farmers and just new farmers and small-scale farmers in general in our region is the Indiana Small Farm Conference. So that'll be March 3rd through the 5th, so next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in Danville, Indiana. And today is the last day to register online. You can always show up in person and register the day of, but we really encourage you, if this is an opportunity that would fit your needs, to register in advance. So if you are interested in that, just Google Purdue, Indiana Small Farm Conference, and you should find the page with all the schedule information and the registration link there. And then I've put on here, I hope you can see it, the large header text, even though I know you can't see the small descriptive text on that image. There's actually on Thursday, March 3rd, as part of the conference, there's an all-day workshop called Starting and Sustaining a Small Acre Farm in Indiana. So it's going to walk through all day thinking about goals and envisioning your farm now in 5 years. How are you going to work towards that? And you'll be in the room with farmers who are in the same space as you, and it should be a really great opportunity. So those are a few resources that Purdue Extension is providing to urban farmers to help them on the learning curve, which is really one of the major challenges for new and beginning urban farmers. So I also want to talk about some of the great opportunities that you'll find within urban agriculture as an urban farmer. So 3 that I'm going to touch on here are market access, highly customized systems, and then that you can have a really multidimensional focus depending on what the interests are that you're bringing to your urban agriculture enterprise. So the first one, market access, that's just one of the huge and glaring benefits of being in the urban setting is that your market and the people that you want to sell to, not necessarily a farmer's market here, we could be talking about restaurants or retail, grocery, CSAs, even let's say you're connecting to a school and you're going to sell to them, they are all very nearby. They could be 5 minutes, a 20-minute drive across the city, whatever it is. It really decreases the resources that you have to spend transporting your product as opposed to if you were in a rural setting. So a lot of urban agriculture is direct market sales I've put on here, which means it's going straight from the farmer to the consumer. And so, as opposed to wholesale, where you're going through an aggregator or a distributor. So if that is what you're doing with your small-scale enterprise, direct marketing, then the fact that your market is that close to you is fantastic, and that you could get customers just by the fact that they have seen your space. Rural farmers rarely get the chance to show off their space to their customers, but you might gain customers just because they walk by and see your production. So 2 examples that I've listed here are just farmers markets. That's one of the farmers markets in Indianapolis. And then a farm-to-table restaurant. And I don't know about where you are, but in Indianapolis, farm-to-table restaurants are really booming, and there are a lot of people that are looking for ingredients. So just a huge opportunity for people in an urban space who are doing market farming. So the second opportunity that I listed was that you can have really highly customized production systems. And that is, directly related to the fact that the scale we're talking about with urban agriculture is so much smaller than it would be in a rural setting. rarely are we talking about more than 5 acres, and often we're talking about less than an acre. So the infrastructure you can put in that space is pretty intensive. So a lot of the 1 acre or so urban farms are not using raised beds that have walled sides on them like I'm showing here, but if you're going to start off a little bit smaller, a raised bed system is really pretty inexpensive to install. So I'm showing here a couple of photos from the Purdue Extension Marion County Demonstration Garden here. And on the left you can see, in this photo you can see 3 different types of raised bed gardens. One's a long bed, and then you have 2 squares in the background, and then 1 trough raised bed, which I have a larger photo of here on the right. And so just showing that you can actually have raised bed gardening that's raised up to the height of your waist. So if that is a concern for you or something that appeals to you, not having to bend over, in a larger scale setting, it's not really feasible to have all of your beds and your soil raised up to your waist. But if you're in an urban setting, you could feasibly have some amount of beds that are actually waist height, and that may be more accessible to you depending on what your needs are. So one more example here of a highly customized system that I wanted to throw in was at Butler University in Indianapolis. The Center for Urban Ecology has a student farm. It's managed by a staff member, but it's a resource for students to learn about diversified agriculture and biodiversity and the seasonality of harvest and all of that good stuff. And so, on the left, you see an aerial view of their farm. And basically, part of what I want to show here is that, in that size of a space, which isn't huge, they're growing, more than 50 crops. So highly customized can also be talking about the types of fruits, vegetables, and herbs that you're growing. And one neat thing that Butler University is doing is focusing a little bit more on perennial crops, so shrubs, things that are going to grow up and be in the ground for a long time. And so I just wanted to remind myself to mention that in terms of customized, is that the type of crops that you can grow, the sky is the limit. So if there's something that you'd like to try in an urban setting, it's usually possible. Again, it's really related to scale. You're not trying to put in 3 acres of something as part of a 100-acre project. You might be putting in 300 square feet of something. So just keeping that in mind. And then I did include a photo here on the right of a resource that many urban farmers take advantage of. It's a shipping container that's been modified to hold, I believe they have some tool storage in there, but then you can also see that blue sliding door comes open, and so that shipping container has been modified to have a sliding door, and then people use that as a gathering space. You could install, depending on what you're doing, you could install a sink in there. And so several urban farms in Indianapolis have converted these shipping containers for their use. So it's something to think about. They're really sturdy, hard to break into if you can secure them well, because it's just a thick metal wall on every side. Another urban farm converted theirs to a farm stand, so part of it the flap opens up, and then the shelving system extends out from there. And so just thinking about that as a resource you might want to keep in mind. So the last opportunity that I was going to highlight here for urban farmers is the multidimensional focus. And so what I mean by that is that a lot of people who come into urban agriculture, efficient productivity is not their only goal. So they're doing it and they're in the urban space because they're really interested in how that can benefit the community around them in many different ways. So one of the urban farms here in Indianapolis is Growing Places Indy, who I mentioned earlier, that does a really wonderful job of incorporating this multidimensional focus into their work. So they have, I'm going to go through the 3 photographs here. On the left, you see one of their staff and volunteer people doing their kids program. So they have a youth program where their goal is to expose youth to vegetables as they're growing and then how to eat and prepare healthy meals with those vegetables. So exposing youth to agriculture and youth to healthy eating and healthy foods is often a goal of people within urban agriculture, of course, especially with school projects. But here we have an independent nonprofit who made that a priority as well. And so they're running their youth program in addition to their market farm. And then in the center, you have an image of a really beautiful shade structure that they built with the help of Ball State University and a yoga class that's happening there. So personal wellness is also an aspect of the Work of Growing Places Indy, and they're really looking at urban agriculture and fresh local food as part of a holistic approach to wellness. And so they talk about spiritual and physical well-being in addition to healthy eating. And then the last picture that you see on the right is another element of their urban agriculture goals, which is to be a source of fresh produce in a community that doesn't have a lot of retail outlets, and they do grant fundraising to sell that produce at a reduced price. So thinking about the food access element of their goals as well. So, as a market farm in an urban setting, you really have the opportunity to maximize productivity on a small space, and you can get so much out of it in terms of produce production. But then you also have this opportunity, if these are the interests that you bring with you into the space, to do a lot of different type of work along with that on your urban farm. So I wanted to just do one more slide, and then I'll close out and hand it over to Cindy. And that is on some of the financial trade-offs you're making by being in an urban setting. And so you can see the formatting's a little off on this slide, but basically the left column think of as lower than traditional agriculture, and the right column is higher than traditional agriculture. So just to think through a couple of the resources needs that you'll have and how they're different in an urban setting than is a rural or traditional agriculture setting. So basically in the first line we're talking about resources that you need at the beginning of investing in an urban farm. So tool investment is going to be much lower than traditional agriculture. So you're talking hand scale tools, things that you're not going to be fueling with anything other than your own muscle power. So the tool investment is not at tractor scale by any means. So the cost is a lot lower than a traditional agricultural setting. However, what can be higher than traditional agriculture, and depending on the state of your soil quality as you enter a site, much higher possibly is land preparation and remediation. So you may be working with soil that has undergone some serious use by industrial or just commercial users before you, and even if it's residential and a house has been collapsed there into the ground, you're maybe dealing with lead contamination and have to cap it off with wood chips and soil and that sort of thing. Good soil is very expensive, so that's one of the beautiful resources that you have in a rural setting that comes with the whole package is the soil. And in an urban setting, you may not be investing in a combine, but putting down soil could cost you $50,000 on an acre. So just to be aware of that. So the second line, we're talking more about labor there as a financial trade-off. So if you are not needing the machine labor as you would in a rural setting, that's going to be a lot lower, I'm writing here, than traditional agriculture in an urban setting. But what's higher than normal is your hand labor needs. And while hand labor may not be as expensive as, a 36-row planter, it can be quite a cost over time. And often in the beginning, urban farmers, or maybe throughout the whole project, year after year, the hand labor is coming from you. And so you have to think about the value of your own time as part of the project, and if you would like to share that load with others, the cost of reimbursing people for their own hand labor. So labor here is a real consideration, and the way it's really going to differ from traditional agriculture is that when you need more labor, you're not really investing in machinery, you're investing in people to help you carry out that labor. And the final line I have here is just about the space and scale differences. So what's lower than traditional agriculture in an urban setting is acreage. So as I mentioned, 10 acres or less, often 1 acre or less for urban agriculture. So a lot lower space needs, although it can be quite high on the cost of that space. Often people are doing it on low-cost leases or agreements. And then the trade-off there is that you're not using as much land, but the thing that's great with urban agriculture is that your return per acre is often much, much higher than traditional agriculture. So just thinking about, that's really true with any diversified, intensively managed farm. So it doesn't have to be urban. It's often small in scale, though, compared to traditional agriculture, but just thinking that your return per acre should be quite a bit more in urban agriculture. So I will stop there. Thank you so much for listening and joining us today and tuning in, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Emily, for that excellent information. At this point, I'm going to make a little adjustment here and get our next presentation slides up. I want to introduce Cindy Chastain, and she is the Farmer Veteran AgrAbility Coordinator here for the National AgrAbility Project. She works with a variety of organizations to help farmers that are veterans or those that are wanting to be farmers. And she grew up here in Indiana, close to Purdue, attended Purdue and received a degree in animal sciences, and then went into the military for about 31 years. She had a variety of different responsibilities, including working with a team of agribusiness specialists that were deployed to Afghanistan. And so at this point, I'm going to pass the ball over to Cindy, and she's going to share about some specific applications of urban agriculture to veterans and to people with disabilities.
I know we've got a lot of AgrAbility people online right now, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about AgrAbility and AgrAbility's mission for those that aren't. Of course, we in AgrAbility have been around for about 25 years, but the reason we are in existence and what we do is education and assistance to help those who have disabilities or obstacles in agriculture-related occupations. So that kind of goes into what we're talking about today with disabled or veteran farmers in urban agriculture. Whoops, too far. Okay, we in AgrAbility serve people with disabilities in a lot of different areas, all the way from arthritis, which probably most of us over the age of 50 have some kind of arthritis disabilities, all the way to mental health issues, respiratory issues, spinal cord injuries. And when we're talking about veterans, a lot of these apply, but in different ways. We've got a lot of traumatic brain injuries that have happened to veterans, spinal cord injuries. PTSD is a mental health issue, which a good portion of veterans that go into agriculture have to face those issues. So we can talk about those in the way that they apply to both beginning farmers and veteran farmers.
Cindy, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Yes.
You need to, while you're sitting there, take the ball and give it back to Paul because we can't see your advancing slides.
Okay. Did you hear that, Paul? They can't see my advancing slides.
You need to click on Paul J. Jones, host, right-click, and make presenter.
They're not advancing slides, Paul. So it needs to make you a presenter.
Very good. They're advancing now.
Okay. Cliff, do you see the current slide then?
Yes, I do, ma'am. You're a go.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think some of you couldn't see that slide, but the disabling conditions that we serve is basically any kind of disability that you can think of, AgrAbility serves. Okay, the AgrAbility Projects are for 2016. The states in yellow are where there are current AgrAbility projects. The states in the light gray are projects also, but in a affiliation way. And then the states, of course, unfortunately, that don't have projects are in the dark gray. But the National AgrAbility Project will help people as well as we can in those states that do not have projects. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why veterans in agriculture. I think that's what a lot of people have asked, and there are a lot of veterans that are going into agriculture, and let's talk about some of those reasons. We all know that the average age of the American farmer is getting up there, and many don't have family members to replace them. So this is a good opportunity for veterans that are leaving the service, because we know that the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have left a lot of veterans unemployed or looking for a new career. So this is an opportunity. Some veterans are having trouble assimilating back into society, and that may be for many different reasons, and we're going to talk about traumatic brain injuries and PTSD a little bit, but that's part of it. But a lot of them can't work in an office anymore. An office situation is just not a good thing. So the question is, can farming help those veterans get back into society and become a part of it again? Anecdotal evidence seems to support that. If a veteran is producing a product that they need to sell, sometimes that forces them to go into farmers markets or other avenues to sell their produce, and it kind of forces their hand in becoming part of society again. And they meet people, and they are creating networks to help them in their farming enterprises. We know that unemployment, homelessness, divorce, those kind of things are higher than the normal population among veterans. Again, the question is, can farming help reduce those problems of society? And again, anecdotally, it seems that they can. There are a lot of organizations around the country that are both studying this and are creating farming environments for veterans to help reduce some of these problems. There are, and a lot of veteran-owned farms are also introducing new veterans to farming as a way to avoid some of their issues. We estimate that about 20% of returning veterans have some sort of traumatic brain injury. We can talk about traumatic brain injury and PTSD as both kind of mental health issues, but they are different. But there is anecdotal evidence that farming, both having your hands in soil and working with animals, has therapeutic benefits for those suffering from those types of injuries. And we can talk about veterans that have the training and skills suited to farming. Farming is kind of an operation and a mission that a veteran can take on after their military service is over. They have leadership skills. the mission isn't done in 8-hour day for a soldier, neither it is for a farmer. Whatever it takes to get the job done correctly is what a veteran will do, and so sometimes those skills are very suited to farming because that's the same way that farming, you have to adapt to the conditions. And approximately 45% of veterans are from rural areas of America, and when they return back to those rural areas, they may not have been exposed to farming, they may not have been a farmer before they left, but they're familiar with that way of life. And some of them dream of becoming that way again, becoming like they were maybe in their childhood when they worked at their grandfather's farm. So it's also a way to give that for veterans to give back to society by serving others, by providing healthy food to their community after they return. So it's another mission. So some of the same obstacles that Emily talked about for veterans in farming is the same thing as basically any beginning farmer. Land acquisition. If you don't already have 200 acres of land, most veterans and beginning farmers can't afford to go buy 200 acres of farmland. So that is why that urban agriculture is attractive to veterans and maybe more of a possibility. And the same thing, we can talk about capital and equipment. It's all money related. Most of our veterans don't have a large safety net of funds available to go spend it on those types of things. So urban agriculture fits into that niche a little bit better because they can start small, they can do what they can with their disabilities also, both physical and their mental health. So those are the obstacles, but urban farming seems to fit that mold a little bit better than large production agriculture. I'm just going to show you some pictures of some assistive technology that can help urban farmers. I didn't want to go into a whole lot of specifics because what it takes is an actual person from the AgrAbility program or someone to come out to someone's urban farm and look at it and maybe give some advice on how to design it and provide assistive technology that can help with it, whatever disability that farmer or that veteran farmer has. But we can talk about, having paths that go between the produce, or that you can easily get around your small acreage farm. Vehicles to do so. This one vehicle on the top left has the guy can roll his wheelchair directly into it and out of it. And he is on a firm path that can get him around the farm. Now, it's not a graveled or a path that maybe would withstand a lot of rain, so you might have to think about those things too, because this vehicle may get stuck in the mud. On the right, we see a little roll around seat that works well for people with back problems or other issues. With arthritis or back issues, that would be a very handy thing to have for gardening. And you see a raised bed on in the bottom picture. Some specialized gardening tools are very important when you're working with the soil a lot and working with gardening. Here there are some that have a pistol grip, which is much easier on the wrists, some with handles midway down the tool that you can hold on to, and it's easier to lift things. The universal cuff, there's some with just handles on the long handles of the tool. These are enabling gardening tools that are helpful, and it would depend on what the person's disability is, but there are a lot of garden tools that can help you do your jobs easier. Let's talk about visual impairments a little bit. Some of the things you can do with gardening, especially in small urban gardens, is to contrast the colors and textures so that person can find their way around the property. Wind chimes or other items that make noises. Make sure that the paths are always cleared and overhead is cleared. And then make your garden with straight edges and right angles. Dibble boards are boards that have holes in them for planting purposes, so that person with the visual impairment can plant the appropriate distances apart from other plants. Container gardening, I've got several slides on that, because container gardening is very convenient for anybody that has a garden, whether it's hanging baskets or a vertical garden. When you have small spaces, container gardening seems to work well. Some more container gardening. The mobility of it, something dies or something gets harvested, you get rid of it, replace it with something else. It doesn't take a whole lot of working in the soil. You work in the soil within a container. You can move things around depending on the weather conditions, or protect them in case of bad weather conditions also. Elevated beds, I think Emily talked about that a little bit, especially if you're in a wheelchair. Working with an elevated bed that you can reach across is very important, and or somebody that needs to be seated for extended periods of time. Elevated beds work very well. These are more container gardens. Now this one also has systems underneath it to water from the bottom. It waters, and it uses a gutter system to collect the water that's the runoff from when it's rained. So this system is really nice, especially it's on a hard surface, so a wheelchair can go between those paths, or somebody with a walker can go between the rows of the containers, and it's would be very easy for someone with a disability to utilize this system. Talk about grips. I think we had a previous slide on grips, but this one just shows it a little bit more. The pistol grip seems to work really well. It keeps your thumb on top, and it's the neutral position of your hand versus having your hand turned incorrectly when you're using a tool a lot. So the pistol grip and soft grips work very well. And you need the handles to be a little bit wider for efficient use of that handle, of that tool. We talked Emily, I think, mentioned just briefly about livestock on your urban garden. Here, this is a mobile, either chicken hutch or rabbit hutch, or for small animals. This thing can be pulled and moved around your property, and it's small. And of course, with whatever your ordinances are for your urban garden, what kind of and how many animals you can have, but this might be a really nice piece of equipment for somebody that has a disability too. I wanted to show you our website. We have a website for resources for veteran and beginning farmers, and the website address is at the bottom of the slide. If you just go to the agrability.org site, and you can find it also. But there's a lot of resources, a lot of farms around the country that are offering training to either veteran or beginning farmers, and specific information on both loan programs and financial resources, as well as internships and incubator farms and things like that around the country. So check that out if you're interested. And the Toolbox database that we have on our website is where most of the pieces of equipment I have already showed you come from. It's easy for somebody to go into this toolbox and click on urban gardening, or click on livestock, rabbits, whatever it is that you want to do and you need some assistive technology to help you to do it better and easier on your body. Please check out the Toolbox, and All of these products are listed there, and it's a great resource. Arthritis Resources also on our, there's the arthritisag.org website here, and we have information on arthritis and agriculture, and these are probably our most popular resources that AgrAbility has. Okay, that's all I have, Paul. So, okay, turn it over to Paul. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. That was another very excellent presentation and lots of good information. At this point, I would invite you to start sending chat questions or questions to the chat window if you've not yet done so. And while we're doing that and collecting those, please also, if you have the choice, I'm not sure what your options are in terms of whom to send those to, but please choose all participants and not simply myself or one of the other panelists, so that we can collect those and prepare those for the Q&A period. And again, if you'd like to raise your hand to ask a question, we can do that. I'm going to go ahead and start our polls, and we would appreciate you hanging on just for a little bit so that we can get your input. The first question, as I get ready to open that, asks about your affiliation. So if you could please let us know the best choice there of who you are, in terms of what kind of organization you belong to, or if you're simply a farmer or a consumer. If you could let us know that, we'd appreciate that. Give you just a couple more seconds on that. If you could quickly finish that, and I'll show you the results here in just a second. Okay. Hopefully you can see those poll results. And I will save those real quickly. And get our next poll open. Okay. Our next question asks about the information that was presented today. Could you please let us know if you found it to be useful and if it met your expectations? Okay, just a few more seconds there. We'll be closing that poll. Okay. And hopefully you're able to see those results. Save those results real quick. And get ready for our next question. Okay. Our next poll asks about the technology that was used today. And we did have some challenges there today, several aspects. If you could let us know how you found it to be, whether it was usable or effective. Also, if you had any specific issues, if you'd leave those comments in the chat window. I know I sent out a couple of faulty URLs for you, so I apologize for that. And hopefully once you got in, it worked reasonably well for you. So again, if you had specific questions or issues, put those in the chat window and we'll do our best to try to remedy those. Okay, just a couple more seconds on that. And poll results. Okay, appreciate your feedback on that. I'll save those results. And our final poll question asks if, based on today's session, you would attend another session in this series. And speaking of next sessions, our current schedule is for a session on traumatic brain injury. And we're looking at March for that. We don't have a specific date at this point. But since you registered for this webinar, we will make sure you're on the list to receive information on the next event. Okay. Just a few more seconds on that. And I will close the poll in just a few seconds. Got one more person in progress. Okay, and then the results are there. And I will save these and get ready to turn things over to the question and answer session. Okay. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Cliff Raz, who is in charge of our question and answer period. And I will also check the chat window to see if there are any that were sent directly to me.
Thank you, Paul. So our first comment is to Emily. So Emily, if you can enable your mic. Comment for Emily. Adequate space and air quality may also be challenges for urban sites.
Yes, so I'll respond to that, and I think, absolutely any of the major elements that you need for agriculture are probably going to be slightly limited in an urban setting. Not to say that you can't access them, but as you get started with an urban agriculture project, you may have one city lot space and your project is successful and grows, and then you would like 2 lots, and that can be a significant increase in investment, especially if the lot isn't nearby. So it's a great point. And if you're more on the urban homesteader side as well, you may find that the space you have in your backyard is a lot smaller than you like as you get into it. So space and then air quality, exactly right. I mean, and when you're in a city, you're dealing with car exhaust and industrial air emissions as well. And so you're probably good to go for growing in most instances. It's the air we breathe and plants can grow in it too, but it's not going to be as fresh and pure as if you're out in a rural setting. So it's a good point.
I think as a postscript to that, other challenges may include vandalism and thievery.
Right. So that's true as well. It really depends, though. And so you do have people who lose part of their crops sometimes, especially things that are brightly colored and more visible for harvest, like a tomato. Not a lot of people walk by and think, oh, I'm going to go grab those green beans because they can't even see them. But if you have tomatoes or maybe big peppers, things like that, they can be things that get taken. One thing that really helps in that case is the more that you're inclusive and the community knows about your project and feels that it's a benefit to their neighborhood and maybe to them personally for food or programming or whatever else is provided, and they feel connected to the farm, the less likely it is that your property will undergo vandalism. And partly because those people won't do it themselves, but also because they'll be your eyes and ears and look out for you. So I think that actually it definitely does happen, vandalism and theft of things that you would like to harvest, but it's not as big of a problem sometimes as people think it will be. So just to keep that in mind.
Another question for Emily. You mentioned indiegrown.com as a network for urban farmers. Do you know of some from other states?
Good question. There are so many states. So I know of some urban farming communities around the country, and whether or not they have formalized networks really depends on the location. But Chicago has a lot going on, and there's an Advocates for Urban Agriculture listserv that anyone can join in that city, and you can kind of plug in that way. I met a great woman at a conference last year from Sacramento that was really plugged in, and I think there are several California cities that have wonderful urban agriculture communities. I don't know off the top of my head specific network names there. I've visited Cleveland and got to see some cool urban farms there. So I guess the short answer is I'm not going to, especially without knowing the state, be able to list exactly what you should plug into, but that whether it's formalized or not, there are definitely other people doing urban agriculture in your location, and you should be able to find them either through asking around or Googling around and finding some projects. So, and maybe ask your local extension office if they know.
Okay, so our last question was also for Emily. Do the urban farmers' resources include urban beekeepers?
So many urban agriculture projects include bees, and so the urban farmer resources, yes. Usually, if you're plugging into a community of people who are in urban agriculture, you can point them to the bee resources. In Indianapolis, we have a couple of usually free resources that you can go to, beginning beekeeper classes, or plug into the groups that are really about bee advocacy and can talk to you about how to get started, how to harvest honey, the importance of having pollinators in the urban setting. So I think that most urban agriculture communities definitely include information and people who are doing beekeeping. It's a really important part of the whole thing.
Thank you, Emily. We didn't have any other hands raised, and we didn't have any other questions, so I'll turn it back to Paul.
Well, again, thank you to all our participants and our presenters today, to Emily and Cindy for their excellent information. We have recorded this, and we will be posting it on our website soon. We also will be sending you a link to that so that you can view that, and also, as I said, information on future sessions. So, again, thank you for participating, and we bid you a good day.